The air was thick with fog as Jason set out on a midnight drive to clear his head. The roads of Wickham Hollow were desolate at this hour, lined by dense forests whose shadows crept across the asphalt under the moon's pale gaze. Jason, a newcomer to the small town, had heard tales of the strange happenings in these woods, disappearances, whispers of apparitions, but dismissed them as local lore, meant to scare curious souls away. His car, an old sedan he'd affectionately named Betty, hummed along the winding road, her headlights slicing through the night. The radio played softly, the DJ's voice a comforting presence in the otherwise eerie silence. Jason's thoughts wandered back to the argument he'd had earlier in the evening, the reason for his impromptu drive. The cool night air and the rhythm of the road usually calmed his nerves, but tonight, the familiar remedy seemed ineffective. As he drove deeper into the hollow, the fog thickened, swallowing the edges of the road. The trees loomed closer, their branches gnarled like the fingers of a witch casting an ominous spell. Suddenly, Betty's engine sputtered. A cough, a wheeze, then silence. The car coasted to a stop, just as her lights flickered out, leaving Jason in darkness, the only sound his own breath and the faint rustling of leaves. Jason tried the ignition again, but Betty was unresponsive. He pulled out his cell phone. No signal. With a deep breath, he accepted that he'd need to seek help on foot. Grabbing his flashlight from the glove compartment, he stepped out into the chilling air, his breath visible in the beam of light. The road, he knew, led to a town either way, but the closest was back the way he'd come. Reluctantly, he began to walk, the flashlight's beam bobbing ahead of him. Every rustle in the underbrush set his heart racing. Every distant howl made him jump. He tried to convince himself they were just the sounds of nocturnal creatures, not the spectres his neighbours had spoken of. After what felt like hours, the fog began to dissipate, revealing a split in the road he didn't remember from his drive. The left path delved deeper into the shadowy woods, while the right trailed toward what looked like faint, flickering lights. Intrigued and hopeful for any sign of civilization, he chose the right path, his pace quickening as the lights grew stronger. As he approached, Jason realized the lights were not from a building or street lamp, but were instead floating orbs that hovered above the ground. They moved with an eerie synchrony, drifting back and forth over a small clearing. Mesmerized, he stepped closer, his previous caution drowned out by curiosity. Suddenly, the orbs stopped moving and, as if sensing his presence, rushed toward him. Jason stumbled backward, but the lights encircled him, their glow intensifying until he could see nothing else. In that overwhelming brightness, he felt a strange sensation, as if he was being lifted, his body weightless, then just as quickly drop. After what felt like hours, the fog began to dissipate, revealing a split in the road he didn't remember from his drive. The left path delved deeper into the shadowy woods, while the right trailed toward what looked like faint, flickering lights. Intrigued and hopeful for any sign of civilization, he chose the right path, his pace quickening as the lights grew stronger. When the lights vanished, Jason found himself on the road, but not where he had been. The signs pointed toward Wickham Hollow, yet everything looked subtly different. The trees, the bend of the road, even the air felt changed, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. Bewildered, he continued to walk until he finally reached the outskirts of town. As dawn broke, Jason, weary and disoriented, arrived back at his starting point. The townsfolk were out for their morning routines, casting curious glances his way. When he recounted his tale, they listened with a mix of sympathy and a knowing resignation, as if his experience was both expected and an initiation. Jason would come to learn that the Midnight Maze wasn't just a path through the woods, but a passage through the shadows of reality. And those who wander it, whether by choice or by accident, never leave unchanged. From that night on, he would always wonder about the thin veil between worlds, and whether, in some unseen moment, he had crossed it